Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. Learn more at uber.com/flexibilityworks.
CHEK Podcasts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Political Capital, your source for all the latest in BC politics. I'm your host, Rob Shaw, joining you as always from the CHEK News World Headquarters here in Victoria. What a week. The surprise, stunning resignation of Selina Robinson from the BC NDP, putting the governing party on its heels into a state of crisis just like that, catching everyone by surprise. We are going to break it all down with our panel, so let's bring them in. Jeff Ferrier from Framepoint Public Affairs and Fresh Slice Pizza is joining us this week, as always. Allie Blades from MASH Strategies, and joining us again, Khelsilem, chairperson of the Squamish Nation, but wearing his hat today as a political organizer and strategist and observer. Khelsilem, thanks for coming back to the panel.
Thanks for having me.
All right. This week, the big news, obviously, Selina Robinson. She was removed from cabinet last month after saying Israel was founded on a, quote, crappy piece of land, a quote, which ended up resulting in her removal from cabinet. There was a lot of, I think, unhappiness on her part, and that led to a 5-page letter this week resigning from caucus, accusing her caucus colleagues of, in her words, widespread antisemitism, ignorance, and apathy over the risks to Jewish people from the ongoing Israeli-Hamas war, a double standard. Some people's apologies are accepted in politics when they make anti-Semitic comments, but hers on Islamophobia was, in her view, kind of deemed irredeemable. So anyways, this turned into a big, full-fledged crisis for the NDP. Let's start there. Khelsilem, to you first. Watching this play out, what did you think of how this happened and any impact that might be on the BC NDP and the government?
Well, it's obviously become a bit of a political storm for them that they're weathering, and it's probably gone on longer than I think the political operatives within the party have wanted. And I think, so many of these things are hard to navigate, given obviously the very heightened complexity around the issues, especially as it relates to what's happening in Gaza and Palestine and Israel. But part of the challenge, I think, stems from, these real core concepts around what does it mean to be a part of a party? What does being a part of that team or that tent mean? And where are the lines in which you feel like you can operate in that team, or you feel like there are lines that you can't cross and you have to remove yourself from that? Her comments that were captured during that panel, were largely criticized by many groups, both Muslim and Indigenous and others, as very racist and revealing a very colonial mindset in terms of describing Palestine in that way. The challenge is that the party had for many months, I think, been trying to curb caucus from speaking publicly about this sort of Middle Eastern issue. But you had a very highly profile, high-ranking minister, saying comments in an interview that then got picked up in the media and became a bit of a storm. And so the issue at that point for the party is how does it address the controversy? And the given the nature of the position, there was sort of this realization or this push to say, like, we need to get off this issue. This is an issue that is now distracting from the core messages that we want to get out there. The reality is that, Eby, since becoming the premier, has been leading a number of initiatives to combat anti-Semitism, and he's received a lot of praise from the Jewish community for the work that his government has done to support the Jewish community. And there's also, I think, a challenge in this conversation because so much of what Selina is now doing is wanting to make this about her feelings and her experiences, when behind the scenes, I think many of us who watch the inside baseball aspects of it know that there is a slow arc to the political direction of the party and where Selina Robinson as a member of that party fits in. So I think her decision to leave the BC NDP reflects a slow arc around her natural political home and her choice to make this about, Judaism and anti-Semitism is something that she would rather have it be about. And when in reality, I think that there's probably an internal story that's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Oh, those are all good points, Jeff. You've been in the NDP for a long time. You're watching this play out. What do you make of how it sort of turned into the issue that it is, and what the impact is going to be on this premier? I think it was fair to say kind of his biggest crisis so far in his 16, 18 months as premier. How do you make his handling of it and what it means for his party?
I think the premier is doing the right things now. If I were in Selina Robinson's shoes, I might have made the decision to sit as an independent too. I think her words were timed poorly and they were regrettable, but I don't think they warranted dismissal from cabinet. I think a sincere apology like the one she offered should have sufficed. Instead, the loud voices prevailed, leading to her forced resignation, which in my view was a disproportionate consequence. I understand why the decision was made and the desire to focus on the priorities of the government. But I observe that, apologies suffice for some, and Robinson faced harsher consequences, despite longstanding service in cabinet, a track record of fighting for progressive people, standing up for LGBTQ to folks, beating cancer, and speaking for the Jewish community that is experiencing a great deal of grief and fear because of what's happening in the Middle East. Questions are being raised here about anti-Semitism and the NDP. I'm not an expert on this, but we'll listen to those who are and take seriously their observations. The premier says no. Others in caucus say no. Others have different opinions. What I can say and what I can observe is from working in the NDP and being a member, that there's a dynamic internal to the party. Championing the powerless is commendable and necessary, but it must be done with nuance. And recent acts of violence, including what happened on October 7th in Israel, citizens of a music festival murdered, highlight the complexity of the situation and underscore the need for a more balanced approach that reflects the pain and grief of all affected people. Yes, absolutely, Arab Muslims and their families and what they're going through, and also the Jewish community. I would express my hope, and I said this when we first discussed this, that we can recalibrate a little bit and remember that in times of hardship, like so many people are experiencing now, that grace and forgiveness are really important. I think that's food for thought for people who called for Robinson's resignation and for the government, which acceded to the calls. But I'm glad that when Premier Eby was asked about this, he's taken this matter on himself as a matter of personal responsibility. I think that shows leadership, and I think it's the right thing to do.
Allie, was this avoidable, do you think? Politics is so much really internally about people management. And the story that came out about Robinson was she met with the chief of staff to the premier, Matt Smith, multiple times. She had pitched this idea of a Muslim-Jewish conversation, community leaders getting together and discussing it, was told no, it's too political. She met with the premier. He didn't resurrect that idea. It feels like this slow burn of resentment and anger led to this implosion. And I wonder if you think, the premier did take responsibility for it in a sense, but was it avoidable, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. But I want to take it back. It was avoidable way before the dismissal from her cabinet position, and that led to her resignation. It was avoidable in that the premier, I think, should have protected the then minister. Here's what I mean by that. And we've talked about this before when the issue initially came up, because I was really confused. This is Selina Robinson, who is very well liked within her community. She's been such a champion for so many issues. She has an outstanding political career. She's not running again. And with the NDP so overwhelmingly popular at the moment, then they could have survived this. This is what I said the last time. They could have survived this, but rather they decided to go down this path. Now, the actions that happened this week, I think, are exactly what needed to happen, in that Selina Robinson now gets to create her own narrative. I think from point A to point B of when David Eby pushed her out to now, the caucus has been creating the narrative for her. There's been a lot of confusion on the Inside Baseball as to exactly what happened. And then here are her 4 pages laying out exactly what happened. So this is brilliant on her terms, that she gets to go out on her terms. And I think that takes a lot of courage. There's an increasing conversation about the double standard of if this was a male colleague, would it have played out differently? We talk about a lot the fact that politicians are in the public eye all the time, and everything that they say, the internet lasts forever. And this isn't the first time a politician has said something that they deeply regret. Yet they seem to survive it, and yet they avoid this big blow up. But in this case, not so much. And so I'm disappointed in the NDP caucus for not standing with their colleague. Beyond the anti-Semitism, this is a team that you have to protect. This has been your team, and that hasn't necessarily happened. So this double standard, I think, is quite embarrassing, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. This is really going to be a long conversation for caucus to be held accountable to. The story that I'm going to be interested in watching is that of because Selina named names. And the story that I'm going to be watching is, well, what's the consequence for the 2 NDP MLAs that she mentioned, Katrina Chen and the MLA from Richmond, Queensborough. And so if there's no consequence for them, then what was the whole point in all of this, really?
Let's just talk about where the other parties landed on this and whether the NDP needs to do anything in the wake of that. BC United wants an independent investigation into anti-Semitism. They cited the example of concerns about Indigenous racism in the healthcare system leading to an independent investigation. So that's their call. The Conservatives want Eby to resign. Robinson has asked for anti-Semitism and anti-Islamophobia training for the NDP caucus. Jewish and rabbinical leaders want some serious talks to occur with the Premier and the party. Khelsilem, back to you. Does the NDP need to do any of those things, do you think? Or the current stance is no. They don't appear to be really kind of feeling the need to do any of that. What do you think?
I think that there are a few steps that they're taking that are probably the right ones. You know, reaching out and connecting with members of the Jewish community and some of the leadership within that community, and actually just talking and listening to, you know, what the recommendations or suggestions would be in that situation. I don't think that any of the calls from, you know, the BC Conservatives or the BC United are really going to happen with the party. And I think the examples used around this letter and sort of the accusations that have been leveled against, you know, former colleagues of Selina Robinson, there's a challenge with it where, you know, there's sort of references to comments and things that have been said. You know, others in the media have sort of pulled up what some of the comments are that they were potentially referring to. Are they as anti-Semitic as Selina is saying? You know, that's part of the debate and part of the conversation. You know, if somebody speaks up and advocates for, you know, a ceasefire in Gaza or those types of issues, the challenge is that there's so much of this political conversation becomes really heightened, whether it's accusations of anti-Semitism or whether it's accusations in the other direction. So I think that there's going to be a period where the government and I think the Premier's office are going to have to do some outreach and some listening. I think that they're going to have to focus on, you know, real tangible, meaningful actions that come out of this. But I don't know if this very motivated, you know, sort of moment is going to lead to some of the specific calls that are being put out there. I think it'll probably come from a broader consensus or a broader group of people providing feedback that they then decide to make a choice on what actions to take.
It's a great point that how complex it is, because George Heyman, who is a non-practicing member of the Jewish community, came out and he had a media conference and he wrestled with the issue of, is it the public confusion about, can you support Israel but also not support its bombing that is killing innocent people in response? Is that anti-Semitic? Is it anti-Semitic to disagree with the idea of to want a ceasefire? Is it anti-Semitic to express support for Palestinian people who are innocent being killed? And wrestling with what you can say as a politician on this, and what you can say in the public about it, and how you feel about it, and were all issues that Heyman tried to sort of talk a bit about as well. For the record, he said he doesn't believe it's anti-Semitic to disagree with Israel on bombing people and causing death. Allie, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, and be wary of that, listeners, watchers. When the government that is in trouble is telling you that we don't have a problem, how do you trust that? And so going back to, we were talking about an investigation and the BC United calling for an investigation, which will then turn into a report. Well, be wary of that as well, because, well, then who puts forward the report, and is it truly independent? Ultimately, what I'm trying to say is that if the government is trying to save their own reputation here, they're going to do absolutely everything they can to say that everything is not on fire and everything is okay. It is not okay. And so the people and the voices that you should turn to are people like Nico Sabinski from CHEK, people who have nothing to lose now, like Selina Robinson.
Yeah. Jeff, let's bring you in quickly to close this topic off.
I'll say it's dangerous when we start talking about people we should listen to and we shouldn't listen to. George Heyman is the child of Holocaust refugees. Didn't attack or reject Selina's experience or anything she said.
Well, he did say
he spoke to his own. He spoke to his own. He spoke to his own views, and that everyone has different opinions. And to say that his opinion and Selina's could both be right. So I've been pretty. I might not have friends in the Premier's office after some of the things I said earlier here. So I'm not playing cover here. The question was about an investigation. My sense is that this is a matter for voters to judge the government on. They'll weigh this with some of the other steps that Khelsilem has talked about. Holocaust education in schools, the directives to the BC Prosecution Service around hate crime policy, including anti-Semitism now, and the Premier's response and what he does now in the face of this and what he does with the Jewish community to bring people together, which is the province's job, right? They don't control foreign policy levers. They don't affect military decisions. They don't deal in global affairs. Their job is to foster unity in tough times here at home. And voters will judge the Premier and his government on their actions in doing that, looking back and looking forward.
George Heyman, who we just talked about, announced his retirement from the riding of Vancouver-Fraserview after 3 terms, kickstarted a really fascinating race to replace him. 2 people emerged: Vancouver City Councillor, former Vancouver City Councillor Andrea Reimer, and current Vancouver City Councillor Christine Boyle. Heyman, quick to endorse Reimer. I think Boyle has the unspoken and unofficial endorsement of the kind of Eby side. 2 really good candidates vying for 1 nomination in what will become Vancouver-Little Mountain. Too bad they couldn't find 2 ridings so they didn't have to go up against each other like this. Khelsilem, you're out endorsing Reimer, but tell us a bit about this fight and for a nomination and what it says, I guess, about the party, but also whether these 2 candidates would have been great if the NDP could have got them both.
I do think that these types of contested nominations, especially with 2 great candidates, do show a lot of healthiness for the party. We have a political landscape where most of the political parties in BC aren't having major contested races like this. And you can already see that from both the candidates that they're really emphasizing the positive nature of each other. And I think that speaks to the fact that they are 2 very strong candidates. Christine has a very commendable track record on city council. She's been a very effective critic of the current government and has been sort of the opposition under the Mayor Sim, and has been quite effective at that. And she was just elected a year and a bit ago, And so I think part of the question for the NDP voters in the riding is, where are these two candidates best going to serve the public interest? And you have a city councillor who's been elected recently to that and is quite effective there. And you have a former city councillor who had a commendable track record when on Vancouver City Council. And I think one of the big challenges, broadly speaking, for the BC NDP is with the retirements or with some of the changes, the new boundaries and the new ridings, is who is, if the NDP are able to get reelected and David Eby gets his first real election as the party leader, who is he going to draw upon in his caucus to lead within his government? How is he going to expand the skill sets of his government? And I think he has a candidate. Both candidates would be great in their respects, but I think that's a big question for the party and for David Eby. And I think that this race highlights that, and it's going to come up many more times throughout the rest of the year as the rest of the races start to come out too.
Mm-hmm. Allie, just quickly, 30 seconds. What do you make of this?
This is a very interesting nomination. The fact that there is a nomination happening and we finally get some insight as to who these NDP candidates are, it's fantastic. The one thing I want to point out for folks is the nomination to then represent your community. As Khelsilem mentioned, these are for existing voters or members of that community. But what I'll be watching is with Christine Boyle, how this affects her council position right now. There's actually no rule against this, that she can maintain her council role in order to continue in this campaign. So taxpayers, pay attention to that, because there might be a little bit of overlap and we should be mindful of it.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, the general consensus here, the short nomination window benefits Reimer as someone who's been involved in the executive of that party versus Boyle, who might want to have signed up members from the outside.
I think the advantage that Andrea Reimer has is that the big advantage she has is that she's been endorsed by George Heyman, the outgoing MLA, and she's been actively involved in the riding association. And so when the riding association members, look to see which candidate they want to choose, and this is their choice, that will be to her advantage. But these are two solid candidates, and Councillor Boyle has an opportunity between now and the nomination date to make her case and show that she's the better candidate, if that's what she's able to do. Look, I don't know Councillor Boyle, but I've known Andrea for years. Smart, capable community leader, record of progressive change at City Council in Vancouver when Harper and Clark were in power. Not an easy time to make progress on housing, childcare, environmental issues, and transit. And I really admire her story.
All right. Thank you to the panel for being here. Thank you for watching and listening. We will be back next week with all the latest here in BC politics on Political Capital. Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. Learn more at uber.com/flexibilityworks.